well, somebody's echoing.
Not me.
Is that me?
There's two spots. There's one on the Zoom and
We're trying to figure out the echo. Do you think it's me?
are you on Zoom or are you just on?
No, I'm just on.
How about on your you have a volume on each device?
Uh-oh.
There's that one. I still got it.
That one's down too. All right.
Everybody muted.
Could that be coming from somewhere else?
I don't know. Is everybody muted? Huh? And we just discovered that. We're trying to figure out who's not muted. I'm muted in both spots.
Everybody's
Are
muted?
you guys zoomed in? No. No? Let me get out of Zoom once. How about now?
Are we good? That sounds better. All right, so we'll try this again.
Why I did that.
We'll call the meeting to order, the Committee of the Whole, of the City of Stoughton, Thursday, October 5th at 6 o'clock. And Candy, whenever you're ready, the roll call.
Okay, thank you. Lagaki. Here. Thank you. Wozniak Scanlon. Here. Payton.
Here.
Caravella.
Here.
Reeves.
Here.
Hiley.
Here.
Mayaski. Lucky.
Here.
Okay, we have Butler and Hirsch absent and excused, and Mayaski. And we have Jensen and, Schumacher showing up in just a bit.
All right. Thank you. So the meeting was properly noticed, so we are in compliance with the open meeting laws. I don't think we had anyone signed up for public comment. Is that correct?
Did that.
Nobody on? Okay. Next up is communications, property tax levy recap for 2024. Is that you, Director Alinger?
That was included in the packet, going through the detail of the changes that were made since the last Committee of the Whole meeting last week. Do you folks want me to walk you through it? Do you want to wait till we get to that slide again in the PowerPoint? Do you have any questions? How would you like me to proceed?
I'd be fine with PowerPoint at that point.
Everyone online okay with just waiting for the PowerPoint? All
Yes.
right, let's do that then. So next is approval of the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes for April 6th of 2023. I would entertain a motion for approval.
I'll second.
All right, any corrections, additions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are accepted. Next is approval of the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes for September 27th, and I would entertain a motion for approval of those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any corrections for those meeting minutes?
I do have one correction. It notes members present after committee members present should be members absent.
Thank you, I noticed that too. Thanks for that correction. So any other corrections? All right, so with the amendment or the correction, all those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, those minutes are approved as well. So next is the operating budget 2024 reports, and Mayor Swadley has some things to share with us.
All right. You might recall at the last meeting, I think I had 4 whole slides, and I know that was a bit much, so I tried to reduce that down, and I think I'm down to 2 slides. And I just wanted to reiterate what the priorities were going into the budget. The first one is to have a wage increase in to help recruit and retain staff. And as Dave mentioned during his presentation, and probably be mentioned again tonight, we have a 4.5% increase currently in the proposed budget. We wanted to maintain courts as our healthcare provider, and some of you that were here may recall or have heard at the council that we did maintain courts, but we did change brokers. So currently we're looking at a 6% increase in our health insurance premium for the city. Director Gillingham is still working with our new broker to see if there's opportunity to reduce that, which, if that occurs, might free up some more revenue for us to use on some of our unmet needs. The other thing we wanted to do with the health insurance is improve our offerings. So at the Personnel Committee and at the last meetings, we talked a little bit about what that means, and that is some of the bells and whistles that the new broker has a bigger book of business, so they're able to provide an app for our employees that will really help them in several ways to manage their healthcare plans. And then there's also a potential that we might partner with the clinic down in Edgerton for some of the services that our employees need. Stay tuned on that. We'll see whether or not that comes to fruition, but those are a couple examples of some improvements that can be made with our new broker, and we think there'll be other opportunities as well. We also talked about staffing needs is a big priority, and there's 3 different ways that we could potentially fund it. One is utilizing the supplemental shared revenue, and that was in the new state budget, which is a 2-year budget. They basically increased the money that's available for municipalities. It's 1 cent of the sales tax, or 20% of the state sales tax revenue would go into a fund, and based on a formula that was developed by a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, they came up with a formula. In our case, I think our total was like $326,000 in additional revenue. Those revenues have to be allocated to specific departments, which basically is public works, some public safety items are eligible, and then a few others. So that's one way we can fund our new positions that we're looking at and cover some of our current increased costs of the health insurance and wages as well. Another way is utilizing the net new construction. So every year the municipalities, according to the state law for the past, 10 or 12 years now, we've operated under a net new construction, which means we start out the year with a zero-based budget, and we're only allowed to increase our property taxes based on the new equalized value that's created through new construction. There's a formula for that as well. Dave has a slide in there that kind of highlights our percentage went up 1.99%, which is the second highest since they've kept records. Last year was our highest, and that generates some additional revenue that we can use to offset some of the increased costs for departments that are not eligible under the new supplemental share revenue, as well as hopefully look at some of the positions that we're trying to create. And then I have additional staffing utilizing other combinations of funding sources. So that could be things like TIF reimbursement or cost reimbursement agreements we have with developers, those types of funding that we can use, maybe some cost savings of bringing some of our collections in-house instead of contracting them out and things like that. And then the other initiative is to look at restructuring fire and EMS departments, and that'll be something that we'll work through the personnel committee, and we'll see what the timeline turns out to be for that. There's a lot of work involved with that. You'll be hearing more about that if we go forward. The next slide is the additional staffing requests, and this is a slide I updated since the last meeting. I want to really highlight the different areas that I just covered and what fell into those areas in this current budget. So fire and EMS, we did include one fire position full-time into the budget out of the new supplemental share revenue. We did set aside some dollars in the EMS portion. Now the EMS is a budget that goes through what we call an enterprise fund, so their books are different than the city. They don't actually use the tax levy. They get collections through the services that they provide. So we basically set aside the equivalent of a one full-time FTE position for EMS, because we know, especially during the daytime, coverage has been really challenging for us, and our call volume has increased dramatically. Public Works, you might recall City Council approved a position earlier this year, which we've already filled, with the understanding that it would be carried forward into next year. So that was a decision that the City Council had already made. As well as under the net new construction, we added 8 hours for the senior center programmer. That position was already budgeted for next year and included in this year and hired, and those hours are already being utilized at the senior center. And then we have money set aside in the budget to increase Park and Recreation Administrative Assistant by 15 hours, get that to a full-time position. So that would also include benefits costs, as well as an additional $5,000 for our IT, so we can do more local coverage with WSTO. Other funding sources, like I said, might include TIF cost reimbursement. Interest was one that I didn't mention. And then we had excess money in our part-time dispatch pool in the police department. So with those monies, we're proposing creating an assistant finance director position. The workload in the finance department, as you heard at the last meeting, has increased significantly over the last few years. Additional reporting expectation, what I consider some are unfunded mandates, but we still have to provide the reporting, as well as just a general workload in that department. Police officer, we're looking to hire another officer to add on staff. We're still doing some calculations to see whether or not we would be able to have some savings on overtime and maybe reallocate those dollars if we do. And then the library circulation supervisor, that was a net zero thing. We just included that. That was something that the council had previously been communicated to, that we took a full-time position with benefits and made that a cost share position. And then we took the savings from the benefits and applied them to this position to make this supervisor position a 40-hour position. So that was one that went through personnel. It was cost neutral, but we still want to highlight it as kind of a win as far as trying to create more hours at the library. We still have 4 staffing requests remaining. One is in the clerk's department. Currently we have a half-time administrative assistant at the front desk in the afternoon. The clerk would like to see us have another half-time position in the morning, if there's resources available to do that. So these requests will all go to personnel to help prioritize them. So if funds become available, we'll have a plan as far as what order we might want to consider funding these positions. The next one is police department dispatcher. We have a request for that. There again, we're doing some more data collection to find out whether or not we can potentially save on some overtime costs in that department. The way their schedule is staffed, it really creates a lot of overtime opportunities, because we just don't have the pool of part-time people that we used to be able to recruit in the past. So if we were to be able to add a full-time position, we might be able to actually reduce some overtime and pay for the bulk of it. So we're looking at that as well. The fire department, there's a request in there to increase stipends for those that volunteer for the service as well as the duty crew. So we have consideration for that. And then the last one is we had additional 20 hours requested for the senior center position. And you probably, if you were at the last meeting, you would have heard that they have a 2 to 3 week waiting list right now for folks to get case management. And they basically triage and try to prioritize those that have the greatest needs as they come in until they can get to the backlog. But certainly, these are all requests that were put in, and we take all the requests seriously. We try to bring them to your attention, even if we can't fund them. So you're at least aware, and the community is aware that we do have additional needs that often go unmet. Are there any questions about any of these? Okay, and like I said, the leftover request would go to the Personnel Committee. It's possible that you could go through the information tonight and make amendments if you want to, or you can wait until I submit the final budget, which would be, I think it's November 7th is the date we set aside for that meeting. And certainly between now and then, I'll have the final budget ready for that packet. And if there's things that you want to change, you all have an opportunity to make amendments. Usually by the time we get to that point, it's pretty much cut and dried. But depending on what comes out of the Personnel Committee and if there are some dollars that become available, there may be some opportunity to change things. I think the biggest thing is if you were to do something now, whatever you want to add into the budget, you would have to remove the same amount of dollars somewhere else in order to keep the budget balanced. There's really not a lot of wiggle room, but certainly you have that opportunity if you so choose. So that's all I had.
All right, so if there's no other questions for Mayor Swadley, Director Elinger has some information for us as well.
Thank you. Just give me a minute to pull up my PowerPoint, please. Okay, can everybody online see the PowerPoint? I know we can see it on the screen here.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. The mayor cut his number of slides by 50%. I probably added 25% though, so a little bit of information here. This page on the key factors and information, nothing changed. As the mayor mentioned, we're still at 4.5%. Health insurance went up by 6%, and the employee share did not go up at all. Based upon a conversation I had the other day with somebody, I thought I'd throw this slide in on property tax calculation, very high level. And I made up a fictitious example. The department has total expenditures of $700,000. They've got revenues specific to that department of $500,000. So the difference, $200,000, that's their property tax levy. That's the amount that they are saying to the taxpayers that they need to support their department. So then we add up all the different departments, and in our case, they added up to $6,689,134, which is the levy limit, and that's where it should be at. So that's just kind of basic math, just showing how it's done. It's different than what you've seen in the past, but I think this makes it a little bit more realistic so that we know the cost, the net cost to operate each department. Any questions on that? Okay. This is that same slide that we were talking about a few minutes earlier. We were about 156,000 above where we're at. Multiple things as I was going through, I found we didn't include the rent of the One Community Bank, so that We added approximately 31,000 in revenues, which lowered the tax levy. One community bank, as a side note, did today say that they want to continue for the next 5 years. So we've got a good neighbor there. The public safety building, we did not include painting, so I added in the 12,000 painting, similar to what we had there. I noticed we had a capital outlay item, so I took that out, and then I reclassified the rent that Stoughton Utilities paid from rent to property tax. So net effect is, for planning department, I added 52.4 to the levy. The fire department, previously I had estimates in the system for the town fire charges. Last week I went through and did the actual calculations, so that was about a $60,000 difference. Those numbers should be close to actual. The only problem is the percentages between the towns and the city may change a little. It's based upon their what's called the Federal Assistance Program budget, which is number of addresses served. So as places are built or move in or out of the towns, those percentages will change, but they're pretty close. One thing I did do is the fire dues. I allocated less of the revenues for fire dues from the pension fund to the fire department fund. That ended up lowering the property tax levy amount by 39.6. I'm still comfortable doing that because with today's interest rate environment, we've got about 900,000 in that fund that's being invested. So right now the projection is that the investment earnings will cover the expenditures for the year. So I have no problem with that. One thing I did find as I was looking through the EMS budget and saw that it was lower than I anticipated, I discovered that the new full-time firefighter that I added to the fire department, I had put all the benefits to EMS, but I put the wages for the EMS person in the fire department too, so I doubled up. So that 70,000 was taken out. That in effect lowered the levy again. General revenues, the room tax, if you remember, we changed the retention for the city from 10% to 20%. I had accounted for that. But I forgot about the fact that the revenue went from 6% to 8%, so the total tax is going up by a third. So that adjustment gave us another 24,000 in general revenues. And I did find a error in Stoughton Utilities EMS rent that I actually had to add 42,000. So when everything was said and done, we were approximately 27,000 over the levy limit. The mayor had previously given me instructions on where to make adjustments and in a priority level. So those are listed, the 6 things that we did there.
And I could speak to that quickly. So on the economic development, I reduced that one. I think 7,500 is where we had been previously last year. And that's an area where we've been getting more and more cost reimbursement through our agreements with the developers or the TIF, or if we write a grant and having some of them administrative costs paid through the grant. So I felt comfortable in reducing that one back down to 7,500. David talked about a couple things at the senior center about the meal revenues going up, so we went ahead and put those in. There's 3 lines for that. One of the things that really bothered me, and we're still investigating with the League of Municipalities, is in the state budget, it appears that the shared ride revenue went down, and that the state transportation aid went down. And my initial response I received was that wasn't really the normal statewide. So we're trying to figure out what happened to us. The bottom line is on the shared ride taxi service, based on the amount of state revenue that we lost and the increased expenses because of the usage, we had, I want to say, like a $60,000 gap, which is basically $2 a ride. Well, our rides are $4.25 one way for an adult, and it's $3.75 for a senior or somebody that's physically disabled. Couldn't in good conscience raise the price $2 per ride on our most vulnerable people in our community. So we plugged in 50 cents a ride, which is still a hard swallow for me to do. But we have to be able to probably ratchet up our price because the state budget is going to be in effect for 2 years. So we're going to be looking at, an increased gap again next year as well. And then we decided we would fund the difference using general fund balance, so we didn't have to, put the full cost onto those that utilize the program. And I'm not really done talking with our state lobbyists yet to figure out what happened and what we could do in the future to make sure that that doesn't happen to us or other communities that offer this service. So that's an area where I really struggled with, but I figure we're going to have to raise prices somewhat anyway, but I couldn't get myself to raise it the full amount. Fortunately, we have several businesses and organizations in the community that fundraise and purchase punch cards, discount cards that they give out as vouchers to some of the people that are most in need. So if the price per ride does increase as we're proposing, the people that would be affected most do have some resources in order to be able to help them be able to afford the ride, because obviously they still need transportation, but we don't want to get to the point where they can only go shopping once a week or once a month when they really need to go twice a week or twice a month depending on their circumstances. So we're a little bit stressed by that one, but I want to at least bring it to your attention that that was probably the toughest one for me to look at. Any questions on any of these changes?
Dave, I just had a question. I'm assuming that the room taxes, the revenue, you've already accounted for what we have to pay the visitor center, right? Or what we've committed to pay the visitor center?
Correct. I'm going from memory. We probably are going to take in 350, 400,000. This is just our 20%. You're welcome. Any other questions from anybody? Okay. This is a new slide, just showing what the mill rate is. I need to add a caveat. The mayor and I believe it was yesterday, finished up the CIP. We tried doing a little bit of smoothing in the debt issue. I've got a slide later on showing that. So the debt levy amount is probably going to go down unless the committee wants something different than what the mayor is proposing. So this is kind of worst case scenario, but I would anticipate it's going to drop even more. But I showed that the mill rate's going to drop about 47 cents per thousand, and just showed properties from 100 to 500, the estimated effect of what it's going to be. So that's one of the advantages of property growth, that the tax rate on the properties does go down.
And I just want to add, so the CIP budget, we have a committee that's made up of a chairperson from each of the standing committees. They met, they did make a recommendation. After they made the recommendation, we continued to have staff meetings to see if we could further scrub the CIP or the borrowing portion of our budget. I believe Dave posted those online or in the packet as well, the updated version.
Correct.
We're in the process of having that reviewed by Ellers, our financial consultants, and they'll ultimately help come up with these final mill rates. But we want to at least let you know that even though we had a recommendation from the committee, our work didn't stop with that. And there's several reasons. Some of them would be updated pricing on some things came in, additional grant money came in. There were some projects that we thought we might push back because it might align better with other future projects, as well as, you know, just trying to even out the cash flow and have a more consistent amount that we're borrowing from year to year. What we'll do is when we get ready for our budget meeting, we'll have that, all that information back from Ellers. This slide here may get tweaked, and then ultimately we can go through those specific changes. I think they're highlighted in the packet on the document that Dave added there. If you have any questions about any of that, especially if you're on the CIP committee, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer those specific questions.
Okay. Any questions on the mill rates at all? Okay. Similar slides to what you saw before. The numbers have just been updated. For instance, the economic development is at 7,500, same as it was last year. But in total, we're up the amount based upon the latest numbers provided for net new construction. And they changed that number by, instead of 2 decimal points, they'll give us the final number at 3 decimal points. So it'll be a small tweak, but nothing material. Next few slides are the proposed changes for the mayor on the CIP plan. I've got the recap on the left. The mayor proposed about 400,000 less, but as you can see, it's a little bit smoother between the first 3 years, just trying to make things consistent for everybody. I could read through my narrative on all the changes. Do you folks want me to, or do you have any specific questions?
For some of you that weren't at the CIP meetings, this might not mean much to you at this point, but you can go through the spreadsheet and you'll be able to figure out kind of where we are and where we landed on it as of today. But if you're on the committee, if you have any questions about this or feedback, we're happy to hear it.
Yeah, the document that's on the website for both the street sewer and then the regular capital outlay, anything that was changed is highlighted in goldenrod. So you can see where that is.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is just to reiterate that it's really important that you try to spend some time, even though we're not talking about CIP specifically tonight, you spend some time looking through that because there's a lot of information and a lot of proposed costs. So any questions you might have, I would reach out to the mayor, or I understand I've been pronouncing your last name wrong all this time. It should be Ellinger. So
not a problem.
Anyway, ask those questions ahead of the meeting so that you can all be better prepared when we need to discuss it on the 7th. So.
Okay, so unless anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I think my narrative briefly explained everything where we're at. A couple new slides. State of Wisconsin gave us extra money, $340,000. I'm very appreciative of that. And they took money away. I found a $100 key punch error of mine, so we just lowered the tax levy by a stupendous amount if we take that into account. But they took away $118,000 on us, so net effect, we only got 222,000 from them. And we've still got two things, the exempt computer and the personal property aid, or actually three, and the state shared revenue. By statute, those do not change. State shared revenue hasn't changed in, I think, 15 years. But interest income has been a saving grace, beginning in 22 and now especially in 23. We're already up to 726,000 for current year, and this was created before the September interest earnings were reported, so it's going to be even higher. So that additional interest earnings is one of the things that allowed us to stay within the levy limits, but still, providing the raises for employees. I did not dig into it. I have no idea why we had a spike in interest earnings in 18 and 19. It doesn't seem reasonable, but I wasn't about to try and go back and check the prior year's books. The interest earnings, the question has been raised, what happens if interest rates drop? They could drop slightly. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think the day of 0% interest is done. We had that for a decade. I don't think we're going back to it. If we have a recession, yes, interest rates are going to drop. If we have a recession, the cost of things will drop also. Groceries will go down and everything else. But if we have a recession, we got another set of problems. So I'd be worried about it when that happens. Yes?
For the interest earnings, what are we earning interest on?
That's basically unspent cash. The way the property tax levy works, we get a large portion in January and February, and then a large portion again in August. So, like the August payment is more than we would need for the last 3 months of the year. So we've got money invested out there. We've got unspent bond proceeds that are used for investment. As I said, the Firefighters Pension Fund has $900,000 that's being invested. The Library Special Projects Fund has $250,000 that's being invested. Same thing with Senior Center. So we've got some cookie jars out there that are earning money.
Okay, so it's not just sitting in a fund, we're actively managing it and getting stuff in.
More than we have been. I've been starting to put things more into the investment vehicles, and we're looking at CDs and things like that. So I wouldn't say it's actively managed every day, but it's looked at least monthly.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on interest?
Just to follow up, if I remember right, we recently approved to give your department a little more latitude so that you could, look at other fund options outside of, without having to get approvals from everyone before doing that. So that's just a follow-up as far as the investment side of things.
Right. Haven't had the time to do it, but, once budget's done and before I start the preliminary audit, that's something I can possibly work on. Fund activity just showing what we have for the various funds. We've got, on the left-hand side, I probably should have put EMS out there, even though they're not on the levy, but those 7 funds plus EMS are the normal ones that in the past you folks had been looking at because it dealt with the property tax levy. But we got a plethora of funds on the right-hand side that even though they're not on the tax levy, we've still got to include them in the budget so that the departments have the authorized expenditures for it. Got into a little bit of gold and blue, if I remember right. That's the Boy Scout colors. but just showing the various categories, wages, benefits, operations, whether it's large ticket or general. We're pretty consistent between the 2 years. Now, this is just the levy funds and EMS, but you see wages is roughly about, on average, 50.5% between the 2 years. You're probably asking, what's a large ticket item? I split it out a little bit in the chart on the next page, just putting in things that we really don't have a lot of control over. Utilities, we can't do much. Yes, we can turn out the lights and put in LED, things like that, but we're still going to have to heat the building and light the streets, things like that. Depreciation, we can't really change. Insurance, if we said we're not going to have any premiums, we could save some money there, and then first time we had any claims, we would get lynched for not having insurance. Vehicle fuel, that's up and down. You can't do too much about that. And elections, it's not a large ticket per se, but I put it on there to show that the difference between the 2 years is about $26,000 for 4 elections versus 2. Next slide, I put in all funds excluding debt service and capital improvement plan, and you notice wages dropped down to about 44%. That's because you've got more general operations. A lot of those other funds are not wage heavy. They're more into the various expenditures that we have. Really the only difference on these 2 slides, well, the percentages obviously changed. Under large ticket items, you now see something for municipal revenue obligation that we didn't budget anything for it in '23. We either missed it or didn't have the MROs at that time, but the current year is we've got an MRO for KPW that in TIF number 7 that we have to pay every year, and I anticipate that we'll be able to pay part of a small portion of the MRO for TID number 9, 51 West and 24. I know I flew through all those slides pretty quickly, a lot of numbers there. Any questions anybody has on that information? Oh, municipal revenue obligation in the various TIDs. As we work through the developer agreements, we negotiate with them various numbers that we have agreed to pay to them. I'm going from memory. TID number 9, 51 West, we had agreed to either $8.4 or $8.6 million to be paid to the developer over the lifetime from excessive tax increments at 0%. KPW, Kettle Park West, for Development Group, we've got another municipal revenue obligation there. I don't remember the dollar amount off the top of my head, but we pay them the $437,000 each year until that debt is paid off, assuming there are sufficient funds available. Kettle Park West is performing well. It's a TIF, so that fund does have funds available. Any other questions anybody might have? Net new construction data, no change. As Tim pointed out, it's 1.99%. We'll see what the state comes back when they give me that extra decimal point. Equalized value, nothing changed. We went up by 13.66%. Nothing different on this slide at all. We did have a little bit of changes in fund balance applied to the budget. The original $85,000 that you folks had known about from retirement payouts due to that resolution. Um, Didn't catch it till I was going through the various departments looking at them. I had assumed 5,000 would be carried forward for the DEI task force for a surplus for that area, just because the vendor got started late, so I did a ballpark guess what I thought we'd be carrying forward. The 9912, as was mentioned before, we did that, transferring it to the shared revenue so that we would stay within the property tax limits. So we're just short of 100,000 that we've committed in fund balance to the tax levy. Expenditure restraint program, we still haven't seen the final rules, so it's kind of hard to do the calculation yet. I see I got a slide out of order, or duplicated, either one. Levy limit worksheet. The net new construction percentage was 1.99%, which gives us a whopping $156,514. That doesn't cover everything. As I said before, I'm thankful for the additional shared revenue from the state, but the restrictions on us and every other local government in Wisconsin makes it pretty hard to provide services. Not much of a change in this slide. I did take out the fact that we were, previously it said we were over the levy limit. We're not anymore. As I've said before, I would not recommend lowering the tax levy for the operational levy limit. That does hurt you in future years. You can't get that growth back without jumping through a number of hoops in the subsequent year. So right now we've got a balanced budget. We have revenues and expenditures equal. So if you're looking to add something to the budget, please propose revenues. Please propose cuts in expenses. Please propose using fund balance or any combination of the above. But you can't just add it without finding some way to pay for it. And that's it for my slides. Any questions at all?
Thank you. Before I forget, Candy, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Alderperson Schumacher and Alderperson Majewski are here in the room now.
Thank you.
So the next item is to review the scheduled department budgets. And I'd like to ask how you'd like to do that. I think there's like 25 of them. So we could go through them all, or if you've had an opportunity to read them and have questions about any specific budgets, what would y'all like to do? That would be a lot to go through every one, but it's up to the council members, committee members. So any thoughts? Or any questions on the department budgets that you see in your packet? Anyone online? All right.
No questions.
So if there aren't any questions, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would be looking to take action this evening just on the operations budget, and that would be a recommendation to council. And then we would vote as council for both the CIP and the operational budget on November 7th. So if there's no further questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend.
I actually have a quick question.
Sure.
That on one department, I guess, or one budget item is clarification, and I know I've been through this a few times, but community commitment. What exactly is that again?
Well, the name was first implemented when Budget for Outcomes went into effect. And a lot of things were thrown into there that really had nothing to do with each other. And so everything was getting categorized into culture, recreation, education, whether it was general government, public safety, or whatever. So I have kind of got rid of those, put them into the appropriate areas. The only thing that's left there is fireworks. And I haven't changed the name of that department because if you're looking back in the history, go back 4 years ago, it was fireworks and 17 other things. So just for that reason, I haven't done any changes, but yes, it's only fireworks now.
Okay, so it's just broken down to just that.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Alder Lagaki, did you have your hand up?
No, just changed position, and thank you.
Okay. All right, so if there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend the 2024 operational budget to council.
Second.
All right, any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will recommend that to council on November 7th. And I think we have run out of items on our agenda, so.
So
anything
just
else
a
to add?
update, you folks have made it easy on me. I don't have any changes other than the debt levy to put in. Next step is I need to get everything prepared for the newspaper for the notice of public hearing. Statutorily, I have to put in quite a bit of information, massaging the numbers to get it. And when that is then sent out, by the time the public notice is published, the budget will be on the city's website that anybody can look to their heart's content for it. But that's all I wanted to say on budget.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated all the extra detail and, the information about the staffing and the rationale and how it was being paid for and just the level of detail. I found this to be really easy to navigate. So thank
Good.
you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Glad to hear that.
Yep. So do take a look, like I said, at everything in the packet so you're prepared for the 7th, and then ask questions preferably prior to, so that the information will be available to you before the 7th. So
Right, and, along that lines, a easy question of, okay, what happens if we eliminate one vehicle from the debt issue? You can calculate that fairly easy. If you come back and say, what if we said we want to change the health insurance from 6.0 to 5.8% and increase the wages by another 0.5%? That's not going to get calculated on the fly.
right. All right. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconded.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
November 7th.